Now, two men in Britain have been sentenced to 4 years in jail for trying to stir up last week's rioting using Facebook. Both men posted messages on the social networking site calling for their friends to join in the unrest. Well, they later said it was just a joke and no rioting actually broke out as a result of their posts. Let's cross live now to Bristol to talk to investigative journalist Tony Gosling for a bit more on this. Many thanks for being with us here, Mr. Gosling. Now, 4 years in prison for a non-riot. Is this a fair sentence?
Well, it's clearly a sentence which has been increased because of the circumstances. But I think it's a little bit rich of Jordan Blackshaw and Perry Keenan to say that this is a joke, because clearly in the sort of situation that we had here in Britain a week ago, for the people who were really afraid to go out because the mobs were rampaging around the streets as they were in some of our cities, this was not a joke at all. And I think actually it's quite right for the courts to take this very seriously. This is incitement to criminal behaviour, and of course these people should go through the normal channels and possibly go to jail for what they've done, which is inciting rioting. Very serious offence. And also we've got a situation also though where David Cameron and the Cabinet, and particularly the City of London, the bankers, have also been doing looting of our economy. I mean, they've had these massive bailouts. They're using these bailouts to, what they're actually doing with that is to lobby the government for more and more power and less restrictions on what the bankers are able to do. We're now in this banking death spiral as a result. So you can see that there's a certain amount of hypocrisy from the government to actually to criticise these two individuals.
OK, well, Mr. Gosling, let's get back to these riots. It was pretty clear, wasn't it, that the police couldn't get those riots under control last week. So are they now perhaps taking these arrests too far? As you say, it was only incitement to causing violence. So, I mean, for example, one 22-year-old man is now in custody for stealing, I think it is 2 scoops of coffee ice cream after rioters smashed into a car. Or a cafe.
Well, that's right. This is very dangerous, I think, for the courts to be putting people down for numbers of years for very simple offences like stealing water, for example, is one of them. So I think actually what's going to happen is there's going to be a bit of a backlash against this stiff sentencing. The way we actually decide way people are sentenced in this country is in itself is quite controversial. Lord Leveson, who's in charge of the Sentencing Council, is actually a close personal friend of Elizabeth Murdoch, and so there are questions about his judgment and the judgment of those who are deciding in Britain how our people are sentenced. I think what will happen is, with certain of the more extreme cases with this rioting, is that people will actually get a lot less sentences, much lower sentences, possibly even be released because they've been in jail for a certain amount of time after they've been to appeal. And I know at least one of these 2 Facebook people actually is going to be definitely appealing against this 4-year sentence.
Now let's talk more about the issue of Facebook and Twitter and other social networking sites and all of this. The British Prime Minister has said that the free flow of information can be used for crime. And could the government now be trying to take control of these social networks, do you think?
Well, I think to a certain extent behind the scenes there already are controls on them. I think Facebook have done everything they can to make sure anybody, even underage people, are part of Facebook, which is really terrible. I mean, there shouldn't be sort of 11, 12, 13-year-old children using these kind of social networking sites. And I think actually it's quite sensible to make sure that the rules that already exist are enforced. But the last thing we need is a knee-jerk reaction against our ability to communicate. It's quite clear we have to separate the difference between ordinary communications and those kinds of communications which involve incitement to riot, incitement to other kinds of criminal behaviour, and of course the kinds of things which are actually part of a conspiracy, such as the phone hacking scandal. It's now become clear there were communications going around on email to do with hacking into people's phones, and that was actually a criminal conspiracy, as we'll see in the months to come. So I think we've got to separate the two. Let everybody communicate freely, but if people are actually inciting criminal offences and making things worse, generally they are criminals and should be arrested as such. That doesn't mean to say you should then restrict the actual communication. Wait until people communicate and then arrest them if they've committed an offence.
And of course, some are suggesting that with these accusations being levied against social networking sites by the British government, we're seeing something of a double standards taking place. The British government was very swift to praise such sites as Facebook and Twitter as tools for democracy during the Arab uprisings, but now considering prosecuting people in the UK for using the very same sites.
Well, one of the ironies of this is, as you try and restrict these internet sites, what happens is that actually, if for example, as the Egyptians did when they closed down the internet in certain places during the Tahrir Square, the uprising earlier this year, is that people actually come out on the streets and they have a chat anyway. I think this is being used actually, as you are hinting at there, as an excuse to regulate more government interference in the way we communicate, which I think would be a terrible thing. And I think it's a bit rich coming from David Cameron, who and the government, I mean, who are many of whom we're talking about George Osborne, Boris Johnson, David Cameron, who were members of this elite Oxford Bullingdon Club. And I'll quote now, one of the things they said back in 1986 was that they smashed the place up and Boris set fire to the toilets. I think they should take a close look at themselves and their club that they used to be part of in Oxford, a drinking club where they would smash places up. One occasion, apparently, 2 bottles of wine were smashed each by these people.
Mr. Gosling.
They look like vandals to me, so they shouldn't really go lecturing the rest of us.
But moving away from university antics and talking more about what actually happened on the streets of London last week, which was very serious, why do you think that those riots happened in the first place? Do you think that there really is some sort of split in society taking place in the UK?
Well, I think to a certain extent people see the looting that's been going on by the bankers and by the politicians, colluding with them, actually allowing them to get away with it by big corporations, and they're angry. This is one of the reasons they're out on the streets, but of course there's no real excuse for this criminal behaviour. The anger is there. What we've got to do is address the anger, make sure our younger generation have got 100% chance of getting a decent job and have a future, because there's many of them out there right now, I can tell you, who are angry because they see no future in Conservative Britain.
OK, Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, speaking to us from Bristol. Many thanks.